Would eliminating the tax cap solve Social Security's finances? The answer is not anymore, unfortunately. But first, the policy. So, Social Security right now only taxes your payroll earnings up to a certain amount called the tax cap. Every year, the tax cap rises with the average change in wages amongst all Social Security earners from the year prior. So it's keeping pace with the average, and it raises every year. Eliminating that cap is not as is pretty straightforward, right? You just tax all earnings. It does have kind of I guess a question mark related to it of how you would enact this policy, because Social Security's benefits are a function of how much you paid in taxes into the program, right? It represents your earnings amount. Everybody has an individually calculated Social Security benefit that only reflects the earnings that you paid in. Well, with a tax cap, that means that there is basically a de facto benefit cap as well, because no one pays above the cap in their earnings. So if you were to lift the cap, this kind of introduces whether or not you should then have higher benefits above the cap, i.e., credit the money that comes in, or not increase benefits to reflect the increased contribution. So if you were to go full, eliminate the cap, don't give them anything extra, that covers 70% of the current 75-year shortfall, or the Social Security's actuarial imbalance. We call it the shortfall. If you were to credit those taxpayers now with a benefit that fully reflects kind of what they had paid in above what the cap used to be, it would cover 55% of the shortfall. So that's the range. There are some, also some possibilities that you give them basically just a smaller replacement above that rate, and you would end up with somewhere between 55 and 70% of the shortfall solved. I say not anymore because that is a projection from the Office of the Actuary in 2023 Trustees Report. Every year, Social Security's trustees release basically a report card of how they're doing. Had Congress acted earlier about the shortfall, that same policy, which now covers 55 to 70% of the shortfall, could have easily covered 100 to 130% of the shortfall. So let's go through kind of a timeline, little bit of history. Late 1970s, not a great time for the economy. That's reflected in Social Security's finances, which is reaching a mandatory, which is approaching a mandatory benefit cut, which we are currently approaching now, which between the taxes that are going to come in the door and the trust fund amount balances that they have, there's going to be a point where Social Security does not have enough in hand to pay the benefits promised. Should this occur, which was going to happen in like 1983, every Social Security beneficiary present and future would receive a one-time across-the-board benefit cut. There is a commission for reform that is tasked with preventing this outcome basically the year before it's projected to happen. It is called the Greenspan Commission because Alan Greenspan was the chair of it. He was not the Federal Reserve Chairman at the time. The commission fails. It's supposed to be bipartisan and come up with a solution. They absolutely fail at their job, but a set of people on the commission basically form kind of like a splinter group that does successfully negotiate the reform. It's passed, and Social Security's finances are put on a 75-year good footing, where it is projected that all the taxes that come into Social Security and all the benefits that are paid out will match over 75 years. This 1983 reform was instrumental in pre-funding the retirement of the baby boomers and basically amassing a savings to pay them out. Within about 10 years, so this is like early 1990s, mid 90s, it becomes apparent through the annual trustees reports that Social Security has a 75-year shortfall. And even though the economy had just taken a hit in a bad recession, Social Security's finances basically didn't recover. There was a shortfall and it was getting worse. So every year that the shortfall exists, the problem gets larger. Some of this is mathematical. If I have 75 years in front of me and the last 10 don't have sufficient funding, every year I wait, I basically add another insufficiently funded year to the problem. But also the things that are contributing to Social Security's finances, like a lack of wage growth for the bottom 90% of earners, those are still occurring. So in the mid 90s, Congress basically was given the report card that said sometime between 2030 and 2040, we're going to have to cut benefits because Social Security is not going to have sufficient income. And they responded by not really doing anything. And 2023, this problem is still there, and now it is so much larger than it was. And the mandatory cut, all of those have gotten worse, right? Used to be that you'd have to make a 10% benefit cut. Now it's almost 20. Used to be that the funds were going to run out in 2041. Now it's 2033. Every year that we wait, the problem gets worse. Eliminating the tax cap for Social Security is a perfect illustrator of this, because in the 2005 Office of the Actuary Trustees report, they estimated that eliminating the tax cap with no credit would account for about 120% of the shortfall, and about 105 if you had given the credit. Now it's between 55 and 70. So we had means of solving this problem that would have been less painful than they're going to be because we waited so long, which is why, at the risk of getting preachy, which I try not to do here, which is why you should tell anyone who tells you about Social Security's problems that the number one problem facing Social Security is Congress. They are supposed to be driving the car. They're not even in the back seat. Social Security needs to be reformed. The longer we wait, the more you have to pay through either higher taxes or decreased benefits. There's nobody else who's going to be left holding the bag except for American workers and American retirees, and we keep on waiting. So you have probably heard all we have to do is eliminate the tax cap and Social Security's finances are solved. So why don't we just do that? Well, unfortunately, Congress has waited too long. So when you heard that, it might have been true, but it's not true anymore. We have to do more than that. There has to be a broad reform to Social Security, probably a mix of benefit cuts and tax increases, if it is going to be solvent, and everything we have to do will be more painful the longer we wait. But for my part, I have very little hope that Congress will do anything really different from last time, meaning that they will wait to the last possible minute, and Social Security likely won't be fixed until 2033, 34, the current date that the trust fund is projected to run out, at the greatest possible cost to workers and retirees.